Welcome to another episode of She Unleashed. She Unleashed is, of course, brought to you by Phumza Dyani. It is a podcast that is targeted to you, corporate lady. You are a corporate lady. You are trying to make it. You're trying to rise up in the corporate ladder. And you meet certain challenges that you do not know how to navigate your way around. We are here for you. We bring you the best speakers that have been there. There are coaches, there are mentors, and they have walked this journey before. We also are not leaving you out as an entrepreneur. You are an entrepreneur, you're trying to pivot, you're trying to put yourself out there to grow, to put yourself into a global environment. So we're here for you to give you the tools of how you can show up in your power. Today is especially exciting for me because I bring one of the most amazing ladies. Her work I've watched from the sidelines and the confidence that she projects. And more than anything, what she stands for. She says she's the relearning and the unlearning lady. And that is so powerful, which brings us to the discussion for today. What are the aspects of our lives that we can relearn and unlearn? And it speaks to the reframing of certain things that are in our backgrounds that we need to, review. And she mentioned something very important for me today, which was reparenting. Zanele, welcome on board, and it's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Phumza. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Zanela, you are such an amazing lady, and we've had this discussion before we come on board. We said there is something that you show up with in everything that I see you do. You come with your own presence, with your confidence, and the accountability that comes from just this big tagline, the relearning and the unlearning lady. How did this come about?
That's a very good question. So my past life, or what I used to do before I do the work that I do now, I used to be a primary school teacher. And a lot of people don't know this, but it's always something that I've wanted to do. I've always known that I was born to teach. I was born to assist, to facilitate knowledge, and to facilitate those moments of insight where people go, oh my goodness, now I get it. And so that's where it started. I realized quite early on during my teaching days that the future skills that so many organizations are looking for are actually children's skills. And it's funny because I started doing the work that I do now almost quite soon after I left the primary school teaching environment. So I realized that so many corporates were requesting to understand what the future of work was about. How do we get our teams to sort of understand how to get these skills? But here I was in a primary school classroom where children were resilient, children were inquisitive, children were creative. They had all of these different skills and they didn't even have to learn them, Phumza. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized something was going on here. The bigger question isn't how do corporates learn? How do corporates create learning environments? But the bigger conversation for me was, how do individuals that have been in corporate for so long or have grown up, so to speak, unlearn? Because they used to have those skills clearly. So how do we then track back to a place where we've always had those skills and we can work from there? So that's really the story around the unlearning concepts. And so now what I do is I help big children, as I often say, to then unlearn the way I used to help young children to learn.
And you do this in a vast number of ways. I've seen your talks where you talk to corporates about how they become better prepared for the digital evolution. I've seen you speak to amazing interviewees where you're talking about how do we recover from COVID, how do we bounce back, and using the same concept of unlearning and relearning. We took it to the personal level and we said, in this podcast, we talked to a corporate woman who at oftentimes finds herself that there are things that are limiting, her showing up in her power. And we somehow took this back to certain limiting beliefs that were, that were developed in their probably primary years now in this context of having been a teacher. How can we use the concept of relearning and unlearning powerfully to appear in our power as women?
I love that question. Thank you so much for asking it. So it's so loaded, right? And it's such an exciting question to answer, because a lot of us are realizing, especially now, and I think that this is what disruption often does, not just for organizations, but for us as individuals. It helps us to realize that there's something deeper going on with us. And I launched quite recently, actually a year or so ago, so it's not quite recent anymore, in August, a poll on LinkedIn that was asking individuals what they are feeling like during this time of disruption. And a lot of people were going, they are currently actually relooking the meaning of life during a pandemic. So what disruption is doing to all of us is it's making us go, something bigger is going on here. How do we show up better as individuals? And really where it comes from is this idea of going back and unlearning. So we were speaking a little earlier, and you mentioned it in the beginning, this concept of reparenting, is that so many of us have realized that we've actually got, and I'm sure so many of the women who are going to watch and listen to this have realized that they've actually got a little child in them that is consistently there. And what we've started to hear are the cries and the demands, or the begging and the pleading of these little children that are always in us, or this concept of the inner child. And when we unlearn in the personal context, it's really talking about how do we track back to say, this inner child that I've always known is there, how do I nurture them? Because the inner child is always consistent and shows up in so many different ways in our lives. We could be in a relationship, in the corporate setting, and we go, why do I handle feedback this way? Or why do I always interact with certain individuals this way? Or why does, when my leader is demanding certain things to be submitted, I feel defensive? Or whatever it is, we find it showing up in very subtle ways that oftentimes we don't quite understand where it's coming from. So that's really one of the biggest places where it comes from. And what I often advise, I work with women consistently, which is why I love this platform. And I've got this concept called unlearning a false identity. And by false identity, it's not to say that that's not who you are, because at the end of the day, I think we can't really divorce ourselves from society, because everything that we are, that we have been, has been under the influence of those around us. But if you could step back and make a new choice, would you still choose everything all over again? Or would you still choose who you used to be? So there's three really big concepts, I think, to answer your question, as parts of this unlearning journey for the corporate woman who's looking to now go back, track back, peel back those layers of paint. I like to use that analogy that if you're applying a new coat of paint to a wall, you want to just remove the old coat. Because if you apply a new coat of paint to an old coat, what's going to happen is that it's not going to last. And so you really want to do that work first. So three concepts. And the first one is to find and create yourself. And this one is really interesting because it's not one and it's not the other, and it's not even the two in balance, because a lot of people say, okay, you want to find and create equally, but that's not the case. Think about all of the different situations that we get into in our lives. Some situations will call that you create, and some will call that you go back to what is already there, what you know is the call of your soul, so to speak, in a different language. So that's the first one, is going back to some of the things that light your fire, rediscovering what those things are. Going back, and even research shows that when you and I are between the ages of 7 and 11, or around that time, we already knew what we wanted to do. I used to walk around the house with a cup of tea and teach my brothers in our old spare room, because I just knew that that was me, that's what I was born to do. And so the second thing, I'm not going to go into too much detail with these, but I really do want to share them. The second one then is investing in yourself, making the effort, putting in the work, doing the research, reading the books, listening to the podcast. And this idea then that you and I spoke about, Phumza, of reparenting will fall there. It's about making an investment. And when you reparent, and I'm not going to go into too much detail with this, but it's to go back to your inner child. And some people will do this in the form of meditation, where they'll see their inner child in their mind, or they will go back to a situation in their past where the inner child was either hurt or very happy. Go back to that exact moment. And then reparent really meaning that you want to close those gaps. You want to give yourself the affirmation you feel like you didn't receive. Say the words that you feel like were not said enough. And I know, just to be very vulnerable here, but in my situation, I don't feel like I got certain words frequently enough, especially from an individual like my father. And so what I am having to do and on my personal unlearning journey is that I'm having to say, Zanele, it's okay. You're a strong girl. You can handle it. You're pretty. You're beautiful. You're all of these things that that there's this gap, so to speak. I have to reparent myself and almost be my own parent. So that's where that concept comes from. And then the very last one for me that's very important is to give yourself away. And a lot of women, when they hear this, they find it so awkward. How do I find myself, invest in myself, and then now I have to give myself away? So let me explain this one very briefly. This concept of giving yourself away is about aligning to a purpose that's bigger than yourself. Because I think that that's when we can make the biggest impact as women. And so many of us sit in our corporate offices and we don't feel an alignment to our purpose. We don't feel an alignment to something that's bigger than ourselves, that is in the form of a journey, in the form of a call, in the form of values that we can leave behind and for other people to continue with. So that's really the idea around that last one, is you want to align yourself with something bigger than you. And if you look around and you don't see how you're committing to that and what that is, then really that's where the work may need to be done for you at that stage. But those things, I think, help to sort of summarize what unlearning might look like in a personal sense.
Zanele, I'm so excited, and I think I'm going to have to call you back to the show because this one is going to come up with many questions. It is such deep work, and I love it because it really is one of those things that we need to do to come out as who we are. What is the gift that COVID has given us in as far as introspection? Because most of the time we're on our own. And I think a lot of women are coming out at this time, Zanele, where people are getting involved in causes that they never thought they would be involved in. But this time has been time that has been like reflection, because they were like matters of death and life and death issues. And there were death of, close relatives. And it made us sit down and reflect. What are you noticing as coming up from women around you?
So there are a few things, and you mentioned quite a few of them already. I always say that COVID has just given us an almost reset button where we can go, okay, I want to start afresh. I'm restarting. And for women, what I've noticed is what you said. It's this coming back to self. It's this introspection. It's this looking within and going, okay, so what's not in alignment? What am I starting to feel? What have I always been feeling? But because of the noise of the workplace, I wasn't always attuned to, or I wasn't always able to hear it. So a lot of people have done that. But then also, like you mentioned, it's those external factors, like people losing loved ones. It's realizing that your corporate job could disappear in a matter of seconds. It's all of those external factors are really making us realize just how volatile life can be, and just how much and this is a funny one, but it's made us realize just how much control we can have, but also just how much control we sometimes don't have. And so that's the funny thing that I find a lot of my clients that are women that I'm coaching are battling with. It's understanding what are those things that you can take into your own hands, that you can start to control, that you can make decisions on, that you can make provisions for. And then what are those things that you just sort of need to go, okay, so what do I do about this? Because I think you touched on something similar to this that a coach of mine once taught me, is that it's about shifting from the perspective of life is happening to me to life is happening for me. And then going, okay, so this is happening for me. Now, how do I respond? Not react, but how do I respond to it so that the best version of me comes out of this situation? So I would say one of the biggest trends definitely is that last one that I mentioned, is understanding how to actually show up in ways that you can control, and then also how to respond to the things that you feel like you can't necessarily control at any given moment. And I think I've been working on that as well. And this is the beautiful thing, Phumza, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. This is the beautiful thing about the journey of change and the journey of unlearning, especially if you're a woman. I can't count the number of times that I've been in rooms with women who are doing some great things. And one or two of us will go, oh my goodness, look at my tummy. Or another one will go, oh my goodness, look at my hair. And it always reminds me of the fact that the journey is never ending. You are consistently having to reaffirm and build those blocks every single day, especially if you're a woman, you'll know just how true this is. You never really get it done. You never get to a stage where you stand in your Wonder Woman pose and you go, I've done it all. I'm complete. I will never have another setback. I am completely accepting of everything that I have, because what society does to us as well is it's consistently happening around us. And so we are always just having to choose. It's funny, I did a video on this morning on Instagram, that you have to literally, it's like being married and waking up to a person in the morning. You have to turn around and choose them on the days, even when on the days when they don't look so great. And you wake up the next morning and you choose them again. And the next morning you choose them again, and you choose them again, and you choose them again. And that's what unlearning is really about, because a lot of people will come to me and they'll go, Zanele, I've done everything. And I go, you haven't. If you haven't done everything, unless you are consistently doing what you can. And that's really the big idea around change. It's this consistency. And I think if anyone is feeling like they've gotten to that stage where they're going, oh my goodness, where do I go? What do I do? It's just have those little things that you can consistently apply. Like you mentioned, Phumza, a little bit earlier, it's about whether it's just a podcast that you just know religiously, it just lifts my spirit and gets me on track. Just do that consistently. And then eventually you will start to see there will be a tipping point, because consistency is what gives rise to change, especially in the human brain as well. I over answered that one, but I'm going to
No, it was a perfect answer. I like that, because the more descriptive we become, the more it opens the eyes, which is what we're looking for. Zanele, in a world where everyone wants to be like someone who's knowledgeable, I've got this, I'm this, I'm Phumza, PhD, whatever. How difficult is unlearning and relearning for people on a personal level?
Very difficult. I'm going to be very honest with you, Phumza, and I don't want anyone to be under any illusion here. Unlearning is extremely hard. It's extremely hard. And I often give the example of, think about the last time you tried to change a habit or you tried to change a behavior. And then also think about how many times you relapsed. And that on its own is just a clear idea of just how tricky it is. Because when you unlearn anything, unlearn something that you've been doing since you were a child, a way of thinking you've had since you were a child, what you're actually doing is you're rewiring your brain. And that's a process that's very intricate. And like I said a little bit earlier, it takes consistency. So it's a really, really tricky process, but it can be done. And that's the lights at the end of the tunnel, if we can call it that. It can be done, but it's very, very, very tricky. And it can be very tough at times, especially when you think you're looking for a quick fix. It's not one of those things that you can just jump into and get a quick fix to it. It is something that can be quite challenging. But like I mentioned a little earlier, it's consistency, but also another thing that makes it very valuable, and I touched on this when I spoke about the podcast, is having rituals or routines that support you. And I think before we went online, we had this conversation around our environments. A lot of us will go, I'm on a change journey. I'm trying to unlearn. I'm trying to relearn my new identity and who I know I'm becoming. But when we look at our environments are actually sabotaging us. And they are one of the primary reasons, or the primary reason why our unlearning journey is not successful. So take a look. I want to just inspire all of the women that are listening and watching this to take a look at their environments and see all of the different ways that your environment is working against you or supporting you. Because what I often advise, Phumza, is that you want to almost rig your environment so that you have no choice but to succeed, because your environment is set up in a way that almost pushes you towards success. And I'll give you an example. I sometimes have to wake up very early to either do yoga in the mornings or go to gym. And so what I do, because I know that waking up in the morning is one of the toughest things on this planet. So what I do is that I make sure that my environment is set up in a way that I almost can't say no. So this will include things like having my gym stuff right there by my bed, so that when I wake up in the morning, I'm not using the excuse of, oh, it's so far away, or now I have to open the cupboard, or, oh, so much stress. I'm not using those excuses. I've set my alarm clock. I know where everything is. Because what happens, and I want to introduce this concept, is what happens is a lot of our environments have something called friction. And it means that friction means that it makes it harder for us to do the things we want to do. And so we end up using the friction as an excuse. But if you are serious about your unlearning journey, you want to rig your environment. You almost want to set little traps for yourself to succeed. And often when we think about the word trap, we think, oh, I'm going to get trapped. It's something bad. But I want you to shift it around, reframe it. And this is the concept we were speaking about earlier. Reframe the concept of trapping and trap yourself into success by using your environment. And then the change journey becomes easier because you've set your environment up. And this is where a lot of us end up getting tripped up, is that our environments are not set up for us to succeed. Another quick example, if someone is trying to do something like read more, and this is a really great one. Some women want to unlearn not reading. They want to start doing a little bit more of that. It's little things that you can do, like, and this is something that I've tried before. It's opening up your book or whatever it is that you're trying to read, whether it's Kindle, on top of your pillow, so that when you sleep at night, you literally have to grab the book in order to put it aside. And that very movement of having it there is going to trigger something in your brain that's going to assist you to get it done. Because one of the key, and I'm going to share one of my big secrets here, one of the key things that make any kind of unlearning journey successful, whether you're in the corporate environment or you're looking at yourself personally, make it easy. Make it easy for yourself. The easier change can become, the more you are going to nail it. Think about the things you don't want to do that you want to quit. And look at how easy they are. Now, if you could flip the switch and reframe that, make the things that you want to do easy and the ones you don't want to do hard, then you've got a higher chance of actually getting things done and unlearning better.
And I want us to frame this so that there is no misunderstanding. So what we are not saying is, we are not saying that women are imperfect, and we're not saying that women come with, in any environment, not adequate or anything like that. But what we have also seen is, in various instances, women do have limiting behaviors where they are the ones who hold themselves back because of something that is rooted in what they learned in the past. And that's what we're addressing today, because I know we always get the comebacks. So say, why? You are always enough. Of course, you are always enough. And we're here to reinforce that message that you are enough, and make sure that that message cuts across everything that you do. It cuts across in how you show up in an exco meeting, in a board meeting, that you don't hold yourself back and say what you are saying is not valid, because you are enough. And we're trying to reinforce all those limiting behaviors where people hold themselves back. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that, Zanele, because I always get into trouble. I'm saying, oh, women come. And of course, if we can all just rise to that, we have to understand and acknowledge that there are areas where we are given opportunities, but we hold ourselves back because of certain limiting behaviors that we have.
Exactly. Yeah, I strongly agree with what you've just said, Phumza, and you said it so well, is that we are always enough. It's so funny that you mentioned this, because we don't think we are so often of the time, but we are. Regardless of what kind of woman you are, where you grew up, what your background is, you have something to offer. But the key for me has really been authenticity and realizing that what I have belongs somewhere. There is a keyhole, if you can call it that I open. There is a door that I open. And I think women have so much to offer the workplace. If you look at what the data is saying about some of the countries and even some of the companies that have just leveled up during COVID, I'm sorry to say, but so many of them are led by women. And that for me says something about what a woman has to offer in the corporate world. And so this is something we must never forget, that we have something to offer, not just something, we have an amazing thing to offer. And I think that the shift or the rise of women in the corporate space is going to bring some very profound things, especially when it comes to trends, comes to innovation, it comes to human capital. There's a lot of things that women have to offer the corporate world that, that are absolutely profound and are really changing the world and how we look at things.
Now, we've spoken about the challenges and how difficult it is to go back and sort of relearn, unlearn and relearn. But what are the positives of doing that? And do you have specific examples where you've seen it in your life, how you actually can emerge powerfully from the process of unlearning and relearning?
Yeah, there are definitely so many positives to that process and getting it done. But I do want to mention that it is an ongoing process and one that takes a bit of consistency. So I'll just give a quick story. I work with, as a part of my team, I'm the only woman who's a part of our team. All of the other males are older than I am, and I joined the team, only woman, youngest of the team. And when I started to work with corporates, I remember I had this this conversation with a team. I did a workshop for them, and then I also did a keynote for their Africa conference. And straight after I'd done what I did, a woman came up to me and she said, "Oh my goodness, Zanele, this is so profound. I was wondering when you came in, what you had to share with us looking so young as you are." And I thought that was very interesting, because what we do sometimes is that we put these labels on ourselves. And we put them on ourselves because she said that, but I was already thinking it before she said it. I had already put that label on myself that, oh my goodness, I'm so young. Look at everyone who's in the room. And we do this as women, and I do it. That I go, oh my goodness, I'm working with this team of men. Maybe I should act like they do. Maybe I should say the things that they say. But what I'm starting to unlearn and relearn is this idea that I have something to offer that is authentic to me and is informed by the fact that I'm a woman. Because the fact that I'm a woman means I offer a perspective that men absolutely cannot, even on their best day. And so if I own that and I show up that way, it really says something about me, and I make a contribution that's authentic to myself, that I'm not faking, but I'm saying, as a woman, this is what I've experienced, and this is what I have to offer or bring to the table, so to speak. So I think that the process of unlearning and relearning is really something that's constant. And the other example I think that I would give is one around be engaging with people. So I'm a huge introvert. It doesn't come across because of the work that I do, but I'm an introvert. I was so happy when everything went online, because I'm thinking, yes, I don't have to go I don't have to fly anywhere anymore. This is fantastic. But what I had to do, coming from the work environment that I came from, was I had to unlearn that. I'm not an island. And what I was noticing, Phumza, and this is the thing, is that the things we often need to unlearn, we've used as crutches to protect ourselves, because we go, oh no, but it served me. The fact that I'm always alone and working by myself is really good for me because I'm more productive, or whatever it is. And what we do is we use it as a crutch so that we don't open ourselves up to relearn something new. And so what I needed to relearn was things like networking skills. I needed to relearn taking interest in other people and understanding that networking is not just about me listening or me speaking, but it's about this give and take. It's about this mutually beneficial relationship. And so I found that when I relearned that ability to engage with people, and when someone requested something, I would go, okay, fine, let's have a quick 5-minute chat, even though deep inside myself, I was going, oh my goodness, I'd rather watch paint dry. But I had to relearn that idea. And what I found was that my ability to build relationships skyrocketed. I was able to build relationships that served the other people, that served me, that grew my business in profound ways, because I challenged myself to unlearn. And that's what you have to do. It's to challenge yourself, because the very fact that you're unlearning means that it's something that you're not comfortable with. It's something that you haven't always done. So yeah, those are two of my examples of unlearning and relearning.
It's amazing. Tell me, and I'm almost thinking that, okay, so when I relearn, am I meeting a different person to Phumza now? All of a sudden, what is this? Is the change that kind of, so obvious? And so, and I'll tell you why, because exactly what you said, I grew up believing that I was an introvert. And only in the later stages of my life, when I started talking, I think my personality actually emerged. It's so strange, because I believed I was the introvert. I studied, my undergrad was become accounts, because I really didn't want to deal with people. I wanted to deal with my desk and the numbers. And so this whole thing of managing people, I was so sure that I'll be a specialist in my life. Are there instances where really the unlearning component brings out something extremely different to who you are. Because this Phumza that is so talkative, Zanele, is definitely not the Phumza I thought I knew. Up until I actually, you come out and you see another persona emerge out of you. And I always question myself, was she always there? Or what was happening? What was happening in Phumza world for this persona to be hidden?
So there are a few things that could have been happening. I think just going back to the model we spoke about with the 3 pillars, it could be that she was always there, but the environment didn't almost encourage her to thrive or to come out. Because what happens is when we get into different environments, we could put ourselves in different environments and we could act completely differently. If you think about the example of the beans, the eggs, and I don't know what the other third one is, if you boil them in water, they all do different things because the environment is different. And so I think that that's exactly what happens to us as well, is we show up differently in different environments. But sometimes what happens is that we get almost liberated by a particular idea or something we hear or a conversation or a midlife crisis sometimes or a quarter life crisis that almost helps us to shift perspective so that we almost transcend into a different self. And this comes as such a great question, because I think even, and I must fault myself here as well, when we use the identities of introverts and extroverts and this and that and type this and type that, what we do is we tend to use those to box ourselves. And so I want to encourage that we don't use those to just box ourselves at all, actually, but we rather just use them to help us get an understanding or help us to get a lens through which to view ourselves and then to rise from there, because we are so many different people all in one, I believe. And our environments help us to almost choose which side of us or how we expand. And that's why you always want to just work on where you were yesterday, so to speak, and then where you can be based on who you are. And then forgive yourself. I find that so many of my female clients, there's just this, oh goodness, I thought I was this person, or I always saw myself this way, or oh my goodness, one time we were out with friends and then I ordered wine and then everyone looked at me like, that's not who you are. And I started feeling some type of way. And so I think it's important for us to understand that we are always on a journey. We are always changing. A colleague of mine shared this beautiful quote with me not too long ago by Heraclitus. It says that nobody ever enters the same river twice, because it is not the same river and they are not the same person. And what that does for me is it says that we are always transcending, we're always transforming. And the sooner we understand that we're on a journey of just constant molding, and we never really get anywhere, there's nowhere to get to, but it's just making these consistent shifts and allowing our environments to call the best from us to thrive, even in environments that are not wired for us to thrive. And in corporate, things are so crazy nowadays, especially after COVID, where so many individuals in the workplace are almost being demanded to put in hours that are absurd. Work and home have just become one. You don't know where the one ends and the other one begins. It's so important for us to be good to ourselves, but to also understand that if we don't have an environment that promotes us to thrive, we need to understand how we can do that, how we can set it up for ourselves in that way. And then to be good to ourselves. Be kind to yourself, be patient to yourself, because you are on a journey where you're always going to change. Don't hold yourself to one identity, because that's inhumane. Human beings, flora, fauna, none of it works that way. We are born to change. And so if we change, we must embrace it and know that we can always change again.
And now tell me, and I love the fact that you brought it back to the context of a corporate, because there is always an expectation of being this way, acting this way, and so on. And I mean, we don't have any leeway to say, oh, we're growing, we're transforming. I mean, we're looking for Phumza who has to deliver on this and that and that.
Yes.
One question I have is, on the coaches and the mentees that you deal with, so what is the type of work that you do? Because I see you have this thing that draws you to women. You are so pro-development of women. Where does this come from? And what are the lessons that you are picking up that are universal to all of us as women?
Okay, so where that comes from, I think definitely to go back to something we were speaking to, is
Mm.
it comes from young Zanele or child Zanele,
Mm-hmm.
who I think because she grew up in a certain way as a young girl,
Mm-hmm.
she was almost so sure that she wouldn't be the type of woman that she wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I have that passion to work with women and to help to co-create a process of empowerment with other women. And so that really is where that comes from, and so many other things as well. I've watched so many women in my environment, family members, individuals like my late grandmother, that have just really awakened me to the power of the feminine, or the power of women. So that's how I would answer that one. And then the second part of the question, what was the second part?
The second part is, tell us, what are the lessons that you are picking up as coming from women? Because I almost think that we go through different phases. We almost like, I like the phase we're going into, where, you know, women are doing things. It's no longer about just the environment must be like this, and women are actually getting tired of things not changing, and they're taking, you know, the challenge on their own, and they're making things happen. What are you picking up as the universal themes from women that are around you, or whether in your coaching experience of women?
I think one big thing that I've noticed, especially because the women I work with are transitioning women. So it's women that either want to climb the ladder, women that are moving from working in corporate to entrepreneurship, women that are moving homes.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest one that I would say that I'm seeing a lot of at the moment, especially I'm connecting quite a lot with the female quotient as well quite recently, is that women are starting to believe in the power of female entrepreneurship. And this idea of understanding that as much as a corporate workspace is really great for you, you learn a lot, you master certain skills, you build great relationships, but so many women are going, I want to start something. They are becoming starters. And those that have already started are really fanning that flame and going further into it. And so I think that that's the biggest transition that I'm seeing so many women that around me, women that I'm working with as well, are starting to make. It's taking the leap of entrepreneurship. And then realizing, because for me, entrepreneurship is really about being solution driven and finding solutions to problems. So what women are doing in this space is they're going, I've noticed this problem, whether it's a problem around environmental sustainability issues like climate change, global warming, whatever it is, and they're going, I have a solution to that. And in the fields where they are going, okay, corporate job, I understand the value that you have, but I think I can do something on my own. I've got enough partnerships, I've got enough know-how, I've got the skills, and I think I have what it takes to really make a very big difference in my community and in the world. And that for me, Phumza, is so inspiring when women do that. But also not just when they do that, but they don't kick their corporate job to the core. And by that, I don't mean they don't leave, but I mean that while they are still there, they take advantage of the corporate experience. Because if you are still in corporate and you are thinking about starting something for yourself, you want to just make sure that those last few years are so strategic that you are thinking like an entrepreneur. You are building relationships that are going to serve you as you make the journey into your entrepreneurial venture. And you're thinking like an entrepreneur. Remember, in corporate, you're actually working with an entrepreneurial venture that's just now grown. And all of the things that you have access to, whether it's strategies, the way that conversations happen, how networks are built, all of those things could potentially serve you as you cross over. So that ability to be strategic about being in the corporate environment, especially if you are going to start something. And even if you're not going to start something, some of the women that I work with are just in the corporate environment, but they want to get better. They want to grow in the corporate environment. And that also takes being very strategic about the decisions that you make, about the individuals that you come into contact with, and understanding that you can drive change even in a corporate environment. You can absolutely do that, whether it's around your values, whether it's anything within the corporate environment that you feel is some kind of injustice, whatever it is, you can drive change in that environment as you sort of build your own personal and career development within that space as well. So those are two really big things that I've been picking up from women at this time.
And then in the unlearning work, Zanele, how often do you find that people actually take drastic changes to how they started with you? I'm trying to talk to a woman who is like cautious of doing the unlearning and relearning work, because you also don't know what you'll get out of, the whole process. How drastic are the changes you've seen, and are they always positive?
That's a very good question, and I'm going to be super honest about it. So one thing that always helps is to break the process down, because what happens with you and I, sorry about that, what happens with you and I is that we've got something called a zone of acceptance and a region of rejection. And it turns out, so if you can think about yourself, think about a small circle around you that's almost like a halo, quite small around you. And that within that circle is what we would call your zone of acceptance. It means that anything from your perspective until roughly over here are the things that you will accept that won't scare your brain. So you don't want your brain to go, it's too much for me, let me just sit down, I can't do this. And then everything outside of that circle is what's called your region of rejection. And data actually shows that if something falls too far out, you've got a higher chance of not just of not moving into it, but you've got a higher chance of tracking back and going, and not just staying where you were, but going even further back, because what you've been exposed to is too foreign to you. And so what you'll notice with brands like your Apple and whoever else is that when they introduce a new product or they introduce a new software development or whatever it is, they'll give it to you in pieces, because they understand that if it's too much for you, you've got a higher chance of going, this is too much, and then dropping the entire process. And then not just them, but so many other brands and individuals use this. And what I often advise for anyone who's unlearning, give it to yourself in little bits that you can manage, because the brain doesn't like uncertainty. And the more you go, this is something big, this is my big goal, I want to climb the corporate ladder, in 1 year I want to be the CFO of the company, and maybe you're just a junior at the time. If you're going to do that for yourself, it's going to scare you, because your brain is asking the question, okay, and how are you going to do it? Not in an offensive way, but remember, because your brain is wired to protect you, it's always going, I want you to be safe. Don't jump out, because, and then what your brain does is it'll remind you that, remember last time you did that, it didn't go so well, and it'll just keep reminding you of the things that didn't work. So you want to consistently understand how to break it up for yourself. How do you make sure that it's in little chunks that you can manage, and you just take one little bite at a time, one little bite at a time, then you're less freaked out. And when you look back after the final little bite, you go, oh, look at where I came from. And so that's why I would say with maybe your clients is that it's just too much. So you want to just do a little bit at a time. So even the women that I do work with that maybe used to be in the corporate space and now run their own successful businesses. One of the clients that I have, who I'm not going to mention by name, now runs her own successful mediation company. And she employs individuals, but she used to be in the corporate space when I worked with her. She'd just gone through a divorce. It was a tragic environment at the time. But what we did is we took it one step at a time, one piece of unlearning or one piece of change at a time, so that she could manage it, because you almost want to give yourself an opportunity to readjust. Because when you introduce yourself to more change, you want to readjust, and then more change, and then readjust, and then more change. And just like that, you eventually get to where you want to get to.
And you're also going into the unknown. So it becomes important to actually have that comforting, voice that says you are on the right track, and explains the process. Because if you go into the unknown on your own, you take on a big project on your own, the universe is not going to give you validation almost immediately. It's going to say, okay, so you want to do this? Let's see how you do it. If no one is holding your hand, you almost feel like you're doing something wrong. But it's part of the process to actually go into, the dark furrows where you don't know where you're going and what tomorrow is going to be, or have I taken the right decision, and so on. How important is coaching then on the process of unlearning and relearning?
It's quite important. It's extremely important, because what your coach does is they're the person who supports you through the journey. They don't tell you anything that needs to be done. They literally just, as a coach would do, is they just bring that little bit of support to you, so that every now and again when you're going, I don't quite understand how this is going to work, or, oh my goodness, this is so tricky, I'm giving up. Then the coach is just going to be the person who goes, no, remember that you can do this. What are the questions we need to ask? They just probe your thinking and help you to think differently and start to see things in a new perspective. So I think as you go into, and you touched on this just now, as you go into a realm of uncertainty, you are very volatile when things are uncertain, and your brain wants certainty all of the time because it wants to help you to survive. So the coach is really just the person who helps to be a familiar voice to you, that helps you to recognize that you are still on track and everything is actually going to work out towards the end, and that you shouldn't give up on the entire process altogether.
This was a profoundly exciting episode for me. And I think there are layers to it. Like we said, there are different layers. We've started on something that is really like a deep conversation, and it's a journey. And I think I did explain to you that I probably will want to invite you back, so that we go through a sequence of all these layers, especially for the women that are coming out of COVID and are trying to, like, because I meet a lot of those, and I think sometimes they are not even sure the questions they're asking are actually questions that are leading them into a transition. The moment you start questioning certain things, it means you are no longer okay with the status quo. You are looking for something bigger, and sometimes you need a help of someone to reframe exactly what is happening to you. So it has been amazingly interesting, intriguing, and the lessons that are coming out of it. So for someone who wants to walk the journey with Zanele, where do they find you?
So they can find me on my website. It's probably the best place to find me, zanelenjapha.com. Or other than that, if they want to connect in a different way, they can head over to LinkedIn and connect with me there. I am also on Instagram, and up until quite recently, I'm on TikTok as well. Goodness, because we have to stretch and be all over the place, so that I'm on there as well. So if they search me, they will find me and connect with me. I'm open to having conversations with anyone who wants to ask questions or to build a relationship.
And then outside of the coaching, I know you do give talks, like Tuesdays, and what are the other talks that you give during the week?
So I do a Change Tuesdays on my YouTube, and that's every second Tuesday. So the next one is not this Tuesday, but it's next week Tuesday, and these are live conversations. If you're going through a transition or a change, you just go onto my YouTube channel at 5 p.m. South African time, 4 p.m. UK time, and I'm there to answer questions. We engage, we have conversations. I've got a great YouTube community that's very interactive, made up of people who are going through changes just like you. So those are really great. Please do come in for those, and I'd love to have individuals coming in for that. Awesome. And I've got a freebie as well that anyone who's changing can download. If you go onto my Instagram bio, you'll see there's a link there, and I created a really great framework that I used to use with my corporate clients, and I still do, but now it's working extremely well for my coaching clients. It's called Hack Your Transition, and I call it a cheat sheet because it's like me whispering in your ear some of the great tools. These are very practical. They're in bullet points of things you can practice from tonight. From today, that you can start to apply. So that's a great tool that I can offer everyone.
Awesome. This is amazing stuff. And I see there's a lot of giveaways and, help to transition for the ladies. Ladies, there you have it. You will agree with me. She has been awesome. And giving, and just giving us all these pearls of wisdom that we can use. You can follow her, of course, on Instagram. She's available on TikTok. She's available on LinkedIn. We will again have her as part of the guests of the show, just to scale this, because I think it is at the core of women, just that we do our part in whatever sphere we find ourselves in. That we first understand who Phumza is, her journey, what she has to learn and unlearn, so that she can just adjust to any environment. Thank you so much, Zanele, and thanks for, the generosity and the sharing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Phumza. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.